Let's go over some of the core .NET namespaces and assemblies. We're just looking at the object browser from View, Object Browser, Control-Alt-J to bring that up. And we're just looking within a web application. I just did a File, New Project, very simply ASP.NET Web Application. And this is going to list some of these objects for us, the assemblies, and we can drill down into the namespaces. Now, as you can see, if we just select the system.data assembly here, which is dealing with the ADO.NET code, that is our database connectivity, we see that this lives in the C Windows Microsoft.NET framework, version 1.1, etc. And that's where that system.data.dll lives. And this DLL is used to provide all the code, all the behind-the-scenes code as a library for us to access with ease right from that DLL. And you can see that the system, the big one, system.dll, this has quite a lot as well. We have the system.drawing, which allows us to do GDI drawing. We can do drawing within imaging and printing and text, and you'll see that in the GDI section. And we also have our system.web, which is dealing with our ASP.NET. This is going to contain everything we need to do to work with ASP.NET. You have additional namespaces here for mail and security and hosting and things like that. Way detailed. Session state is very important. But you'll notice that usually within your assemblies you have one major area that deals with the system.web or any of the namespaces. You see system.drawing, and then you have more specifics. If we look at system.xml, we'll see the same thing. This is the main one that most of us are going to use, and then you have specifics. This is dealing with how to work with XML. Very easy to work with XML, and XML can be quite difficult and quite extensive. .NET covers it completely. XPath, a popular way to work with XML. XSL, another popular way when you're doing style sheets for your XML, similar to style sheets and CSS for HTML. You can deal with many things like SOAP within the serialization. And you just see that system.xml would be the main one, like I said. Coincides with the name there. So this is a namespace within one DLL, which is the assembly, and then we have a whole bunch of different classes that we can work with, and you can see further down some summaries. You can go through this as you need to. I encourage you to look at this. You can always see that in that folder here. You can always see all these different things that are going to help within the framework, but you see a lot of the DLLs here that are very important. There's our system.data.dll, that's the assembly, and you don't want to mess with this too much, but this is where it all lives there. So that's pretty much a little hierarchy of what's going on here. System, like I said, that's the big one. And then you can see at the top here we have some compilation and code generation namespaces here for C# and Visual Basic. If you want to do the Win32 world of programming, this is often hidden or buried within .NET, or people think that it is, because .NET takes a lot of that extra work out of the way of doing that low-level Win32. Many applications, commercial applications, deal with working with the Win32 because it gives you so much power. Well, you can still do that within .NET. You just have to work within your Win32 namespace there. And these help with compilation and code generation issues, if you wanted to do things like that. And then we see we have our main system area here that we would come into, and we have many different ways to work with, including the system.NET if we're working with internet-related connectivity, sockets. This deals with like your WinSocks if you're a WinSock programmer from the previous ways of working in programming. You can do a lot with TCP, IP, and FTP and all of that, and that's how you would program there. Cryptography is also covered here, working with regular expressions and your text processing. Multi-threaded applications would work within the system.threading, and then timers, time intervals, and other web type hosting classes that you can find within system.web here, different than the system.web that you find here. So the idea is that you have an assembly, that's the DLL, then you have your namespaces within that DLL, because you can have multiple namespaces within a DLL, and then you find the namespace that you need. You always start with the same namespace as the assembly with these Microsoft assemblies and namespaces, and that for the most part is where you're going to work. And if you need advanced functionality, then you'll go out into the other world of what else is here, what else is provided for you to deal with. If you needed to deal with session state specifically with some detail, then you would use this particular namespace. as well as your security. And you can find things that you need here as well. Find within the object browser. This MS Core library, this is the main library that the Common Language Runtime is going to use to make everything happen for you within the .NET world. And if you look, there are similar ways of working, but you also have additional ways of working with system.runtime and reflection to do some advanced things within your code. And it's like programming your own code, or your code's already programmed, but you're taking a programmer's look at it. So it's very interesting to be able to work like that. So what it is providing is like a dynamic look at your code and a dynamic way of programming. And you also have a lot to do with your types and how you deal with your types within the core library. mscorelib.dll, very, very important. So you see a hierarchy. It's really deep, but you don't have to dive all into the deepest parts of it. You can work on the surface. But just think of it as a way, this is all that code available for you, optimized. It's a way to jump in and get started with so many different types of programming without having to actually create it yourself. And it makes for a very, very helpful way to work. Much better than working with the Microsoft Foundation classes or Active Template Library and all those older ways of doing things. They're still very cool ways of programming as well. They all have their good points, their bad points, and their benefits, but .NET really, really outshines them all.